We probably have Bruce Springsteen concert right now.
Welcome, everybody. We're very happy that all of you are here to hear from our distinguished panel of graduates from various programs in the department. I really was quite taken by the range of backgrounds they're coming from, positions they're in, experiences they've had, and I think there's a lot we'll be learning from the discussion today. What I'm going to do, I decided to sort of invert the usual order. My wife, whose last name is Stevens, always bemoaned the fact that Stevenses never get, to it. They never get asked in class or anything like that because they're at the bottom of the alphabetical order. So we're going to start in reverse order in order to invert that paradigm for once. So I'm going to be introducing each of the speakers in turn, just before, saying a little bit about them just before they start speaking. To give you a sense of what we're hoping we can touch on, we'd like the speakers to give us a brief sense of their current position, and I'll be touching on that a little bit, how they got to that position, particularly focusing on what kinds of tips they might have for us and what kinds of processes are really useful in terms of job searching and career development, how their TC training helped, and what would they do differently at TC if they were starting anew, what course they would now take that they might not have. I've already heard people talking about that they should really have taken an extra Doherty course, and I'm entirely in agreement. So it's that kind of thing we want to hear a lot about. In any case, let me introduce our speakers. We'll be starting with Courtney Steers, who's a graduate of the Politics and Education program. Let me tell you briefly about Courtney. She's an education design technologist at New York University. And by the way, this information you'll find in the blue handout that's available to you, but just to touch on certain features. She's a former math and science teacher and was in the Politics and Education program. She currently works as an educational design technologist at NYU, working closely with faculty to develop their online courses. So Courtney, could you start us off?
Sure. I'm sorry. What was the question? I thought we were doing intros first. So what we'll
be doing is each in turn, I'll say little brief intros. I introduce each of the speakers.
Okay, so just say a little bit about.
Talk a little bit about your position, how you got there, what tips you'd give us.
Okay.
How TC helped. What would you want to have? What realizations did you come to in the course of your career progress so far?
Okay. It's hard when you're used to going at the end of the line to suddenly being thrown off. So I'm an education design technologist at NYU. So I help faculty redesign their courses to be online. So when I came to TC, I thought I was going to stay within policy work, and I did some work with the Gates Foundation and the Police Athletic League after I graduated. However, within that period, I became involved with doing stuff with assessments, particularly around math and science, and that kind of led me into education publishing, which led me into e-learning, which is definitely my passion now. I love working in technology. So I think for my tips would be to be open-minded. I think that when I came to Teachers College, I was very confident in what my life was going to look like. And I think as one of the people who graduated the longest time ago, I will tell you that your life happens as you're making plans. So just be kind of open to changes and keep an open mind about opportunities as well. A lot of things will sometimes start as contract positions or temporary or part-time, and then they'll need someone to be a project manager. So kind of positioning yourself in that way can be really helpful. And I've seen the people who have excelled within my graduating class have been people who were open to opportunity. And in terms of what I would take differently at TC, I think it would just, even though I loved my program, I definitely would want to take advantage of some of the technology classes here because they're also world-renowned and have a lot going on.
Okay, thank you. Why don't you pass it on? I'll just get up. Our second speaker is Mina Shirmo Hamadali. She's the SPO Strategic Analyst at the Mayor's Office of Contract Services, and SPO stands for?
It actually stands for the initiative, which is, oh, sorry. Hi. Okay. It actually stands for the initiative, which is very long, Strategic Procurement Operations Initiative. So.
Okay, thank you. So she's on the Shaping the Strategic Analysis team at the Procurement Innovation Initiative, and she's a graduate of the Sociology and Education program at Teachers College. Please take it away.
All right. Well, hello. I know my last name is a mouthful, I would say. But if you actually just think of the boxer Muhammad Ali and add a sheer to it, sheer Muhammad Ali, right? It's less intimidating, right? Or as my father says, sheer Cassius Clay, to be more accurate. Anyways, so yeah, I went to, so I'm originally from the Golden State, just saying, West Coast, the best coast. And I graduated from the Sociology and Education program here at TC. I did my undergrad at UC Berkeley, go Bears. And anyway, Stanford? Sorry, I'm just joking. Oh, my true feelings come out. Sorry, I'm going to keep a professional decorum. All right, so within the first 4 months, actually, of being a student here, I applied for a job with the Pre-K for All initiative, if anyone here has heard of it. And I was a case manager, which loosely was basically a program manager. So we have, over 1,800 pre-K sites now throughout New York City that are publicly funded. The majority of which are not actually at public schools, are at what we call CBOs. So they're community-based, whether it be a YMCA, Salvation Army, whatever. Anyways, when I came in, I was helping new sites open for the first day of school. So anything from literally permitting to construction to staffing to figuring out what curriculum they were going to be using. I even put a construction hat on at one point. Really everything to make sure that they were ready to open first day of school. So after doing that for 6 months, I was brought over to the main central office to do more backgrounds policy work for the pre-K team, which led into more health, safety policies and regulations to make sure that our students and our staff were supported at the schools. Pre-K was very much a startup, I'd like to call it, because we were basically doing as we were going. It's expanded a lot because of Mayor de Blasio, and so there was just a lot of moving pieces. And actually, because of that experience and because of the amount of work I was actually exposed to in the short amount of time, I was able to get recruited for this new initiative with the Mayor's Office, which is the Citywide Procurement Innovation Initiative. So how can I describe this? Basically, 80% of city work is actually not done by the city. We contract it out, and it's done by somebody else. So whether it be a nonprofit, a for-profit, an organization, that work is handled by somebody else. We publicly fund it. They register with us. They're contracted by the city to do the work. That process is really arduous and is filled with a lot of bureaucratic inefficiencies. And so what they're trying to do now is they've actually funneled a huge amount of money, nearly $80 million worth, to revitalize that entire process, including introducing an e-procurement system, so a brand new online system. But along with that, you can imagine when you're introducing a new system, there's still people that are working within these systems. And when you're talking city work, you're talking people who have been there anywhere from me, who's been there like 2 years, to people who've literally been there 40, 50 years. And so you have to be mindful of how people operate within those systems. And they've seen many, many iterations of these systems happening. And so there's a cultural shift that happens when a new system is in place. And so my team was brought in to be the more strategic thinkers. So think of it as like an in-house consulting team. We're going to be helping the agencies, and we're going to be working with vendors to make sure that when this system is released, we have the proper workflows and processes in place so that it actually is productive and makes it both equitable for the vendors that are applying and want to work with the city, and also more efficient for the agencies, because right now it can take anywhere from 500 to 800 days for the city to register a single contract. So, for example, sanitation, you might not realize it, but those are mostly private companies, and it can take up to 800 days before that sanitation company can do their work. So while, it's hard for me sometimes to explain what it is I do, I think what I've appreciated the most about my entire trajectory at this point, and it's not been that long to be honest, is that I have a really, really, really deep appreciation for the actual groundwork and the actual day-to-day tasks and personnel that are actually doing the work that is usually unappreciated and overlooked, because the ones that you hear about and see are the ones that are, at City Hall or whatever, but you don't hear about, the over 50,000 employees at any different given agency and at our contracted programs that are actually doing a lot of the work. So my advice is, very similar, to be open-minded, but also to understand that the work that, you're gonna end up doing is gonna be very, very tough in terms of you're not gonna necessarily be doing policy analysis on day one. You might be doing a lot of Excel analysis, and you might be doing a lot of, and I'm not trying to degrade the work because it's extremely important, and it's going to actually be that work that you might undermine is actually gonna be the work that is going to push your career forward the most. And so that would be my biggest piece of advice. I loved my experience here at TC. I would admit that I took a lot of theoretical coursework that was extremely helpful, and while I didn't take as many of the, more, quantitative analyses and things like that, I actually really, really appreciate my sociology degree because people often tell me that I have a different way of thinking, and that I see outside of the box in ways that other my coworkers can't see, and it's because of my experience here at TC, and so I'm incredibly indebted to that. So.
Thank you very much. So let me briefly introduce Zach Billington. He's currently a showcase manager with the Showcase Schools program in the New York City Department of Education. He supports schools in designing inter-visitation professional development. He'll tell us more about it. He's a graduate of the Ed Policy program, and of particular note is his capstone project led directly to the position he's in, testifying to how useful that kind of connection can be. Thank you. Zach, please.
Hey, everyone. I'm also from California, UC Santa Cruz. Go Banana Slugs. Best mascot ever, if you didn't know that already. Boo Bears. So I am, as I said, or as Kevin mentioned, a showcase manager for the Showcase Schools program at the DOE. Our program is focused on finding schools that have really strong practices in different areas and coaching them and supporting them in designing intervisitation days. So they 3 times a year open their doors to staff from throughout the city, school staff, central staff, superintendents, field bureau people, to come and learn about what they're doing and how they're doing it and how they support it, how they allocate resources, how they train their teachers, how they get student buy-in, like all these things. And so our program helps run the logistics and the just all the behind-the-scenes stuff of coordinating all of that, but also the main part of what we do is coaching the schools in how to design these adult learning experiences and how to really articulate and explain and discuss their practices with other educators, which is something that a lot of schools don't have practice doing. So part of my work is coaching some of the schools in doing that. And part of my work, the other part of my work, which is much more directly related to the Ed Policy program, is doing program analysis for our office, or for our program. So looking at the feedback that we get from visitors after every visit about the things they enjoyed, the things that resonated, what they learned, using that to try to tweak our visits, but also doing more in-depth interviews, focus groups, doing some observations with our visitors to really understand how they're translating what they learned at our visits into their own practice, and then using that qualitative data to drive more substantive program improvement. So those are sort of the 2 main things. Echoing the point that they've both made about sort of being open-minded, I was hired as a project associate to do Excel entry. And about 3 weeks into the job, just as soon as I actually learned where my desk was, it was about time to start doing my capstone here for Ed Policy, and I was like, well, I've already been thinking about it. This program's pretty interesting. I feel like there's a lot of potential for growing the capacity of educators in the city, and they're not really doing any eval work that I'm aware of. So I pitched it to Luis, who very reluctantly gave me a yes. Pitched it to my bosses, who very enthusiastically gave me a yes because they needed the work done. And then that's where my capstone came out of, which was amazing. I got the job, however, partly because of Penny Woolstedter's Craft of Policy Analysis course, which if you haven't taken it, take it. It's great. Take Kevin's classes too. I'm the one who said I didn't take any of his classes. I was a politics undergrad, so I kind of wanted to do everything else while I was here, and so I skipped politics, sorry. But in Penny's class, my group, we focused on supporting teacher quality improvement and teacher retention in District 9 in the Bronx. And one of those schools that we focused on particularly happened to be in the Showcase program. So when I went to interview with them, I was like, oh yeah, you have one of the schools that I was just focusing on and like doing research about. And they're like, great, love it. Being able to make that connection, super valuable. But yeah, definitely be open to, in terms of advice, be open to things that don't look necessarily super glamorous at the time, especially at the DOE. That's where you start. It's just a fact. But there's a lot of room for growth, a lot of room for shifting. I sort of shoehorned my way into my position now. I was not hired with any picture in mind of me doing either eval or the school coaching work, but I really like pushed my way into that based on the skills that I developed here that I then demonstrated in the work and demonstrated interest. So I think that if you can be open to it and then demonstrate that you have skill in wherever you want to go, people will respond to that. And really, most bosses want to capitalize on the skills that you have. So if you can just get your foot in the door and then show that you're capable from there, you'll be doing great. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker, Joe Lishi, is the Director of Evaluation at Harlem RBI, which is a community-based youth development organization in East Harlem and the South Bronx. He leads the monitoring, evaluation, research, and innovation efforts at that organization.
That's great. Thank you. That's all we need to hear about my formal job and job title. If you have questions, you can ask later. Can everyone hear me? Is the microphone necessary? We need it for the. Oh, we need it for the photon capture. So, in terms of the work I do, it's a lot of fun. So, evaluation includes literally from the root to the fruit. That might be needs assessment, implementation fidelity, working with program to ensure that the evaluation is embedded in everything in the program, all the way to outputs and then impact, which is a lot of fun. It includes continuous improvement management. So if you're into sort of the trendy evaluative things like rapid cycle evaluation or shifting culture so that folks are more data driven, that's sort of work I do. On the research side, it's just any sort of research that is going to impact the work that we do. Innovation, it really is all over the place, creating frameworks for innovation within and across the sector. It's a lot of fun, which includes some of things that are similar to what he said in terms of like ensuring that community of practice or the sort of go and see approach is part of our staff's internal innovation efforts, things like that. I also adjunct on the side. I consult on the side. That can be strategy all the way through, folks just trying to problem solve, or if they're looking for, straight hard evaluation, we can do that as well. And I also am the co-founder and president of the New York Consortium of Evaluators, which is the American Evaluation Association's regional affiliate. I started probably 2013, and I left, and they asked me to come back and be president, which is nice. All that said, in terms of TC and the benefit, I don't know where all of you are in your graduate life cycle, but I would say there's a KSAs. If you're a teacher, you're familiar, right? Knowledge, skills, attitudes, behaviors. I would say KSIN, which would be knowledge, skills, and then involvement, and then networking. And those things, if you're not doing them, I mean, you're not really creating the best case statement for yourself as a really strong candidate. When I say knowledge, I would say knowledge might be the theory classes, but also just deep knowledge of, whatever it is that you want to pursue a career in. I think that's really important. I don't hire people who don't have a sense of what they're talking about. It's just not going to happen. Skills, methodological approaches matter. So I'm a methodologist. So if someone, again, like I help other folks in other organizations get jobs, I hire folks myself. And again, like if someone's going to try and talk about, let's say, regression analysis, you better know what you're talking about, because I'm going to ask some tough questions. So I think the skills, or like skills, like if you say you can do ethnographic research, we'll make sure you can do it. But I think that's stuff you can get away with, just maybe knowing buzzwords. But I'm just a fan of having a deeper, actual, like practical knowledge of that sort of stuff. Involvement, that means if there is an area of interest that you actually think you might want to pursue, get involved. It's not hard. When I was still in school here, I was like, ed tech is interesting. I don't know if I want to do it, but I did it, and did some pitch fests, whatever. Won a couple where we got some funding, but it didn't go anywhere. But it was still a really fun little thing to throw on the resume, And so I'm still involved with EdTech now. So that's something to think about. Stay involved. Just like they said, take advantage of opportunities. And then the networking is essential. Like you're at a place where your peers as well as your professors are talented, smart, and connected. So when I was here, I worked with a host of professors. I'm buddies with Luis Huerta. Hank needed a PowerPoint for a conference. I never took a class. I took one class with him. I'll make the guy a PowerPoint, whatever. So I did little jobs here and there, just again to beef up my relationships, so that when, let's say, Amy Wells or Palace or whoever needed someone to work on a project, they tap me. So that's something I would definitely recommend. Get involved as much as you can, as much as you have capacity for. That's definitely something I would say. And I forgot. Oh, in terms of courses, I mentioned the go hard on the methodological, or strong courses, or courses, again, that networking piece is really important. If someone's famous and well-known in the field, take a class, So Kagan's policy, Federal Policy Institute, essential. I'm a big fan of Doug Reddy. I think he's still doing the two sequence course. I'd definitely do that. I went over and worked with, I bounced around. I took some stats classes at QMSS. I took some ethnography classes at Columbia Main School. There's innovation in education, at least I don't know if they still have it, at the business school, actually. Shockingly, the students weren't so strong, but the professors were interesting and the guests were great. So anyway, you have a really robust network of opportunity here, and I think the more you take advantage of it, the stronger candidate you'll be.
SoCal.
Graduate of the Ed Policy Program. Natalie is the Director of Career Programs at the TEAC Fellowship here in New York. She's working on the college success strategic initiatives involving the intersection between students' academic and career aspirations as they move into college and into the workforce. Her culminating paper was exploring the theory of action behind TEAC and other organizations. So again, showing the importance of how useful that connection can be. Thank you very much, Natalie. Carry it away.
I was going to mention that because I wasn't sure if you knew that when a year ago, actually this month, I had, the person who was in my current position was leaving, and at that time I had, maybe in those six or 8 weeks prior to that, I'd finished my my thesis, and it was just kind of the perfect timing for me to be like, oh yeah, new executive director, by the way, this is the thesis I just wrote about the TEAC Fellowship and career programs and kind of the trajectory that we're doing. And so I think that landed me in the job that I currently have at TEAC. I started there in 2014 when I was in the middle of my master's program, and I was the assistant director of high school programs there for 2 years, and then I transitioned into this role in June 2016. And so I kind of had a unique path in that I started my master's program in the fall. And then by the time spring came around, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do my thesis on. I knew that I wanted to spend more time in New York. Being from California, I was just kind of getting my feet wet with cold weather and with really understanding the New York City education landscape. And I decided that I wanted to continue to work. I wanted to go back into the workforce and also finish my master's at the same time and finish out my coursework. So I did one class each term, summer, fall, and spring, and completed my thesis in that process as well. And for me, that made for a more fruitful experience, knowing that the work that I was doing with my thesis and the courses that I was completing directly tied to the organization that I was working for, and allowed me to also look at peer organizations at the same time and to understand the nuanced differences between them and also the similarities and overlap. And so in my role as the director of career programs, I work primarily with our college population. We serve students from low-income backgrounds from the 5 boroughs beginning in the middle school years, support them in getting into independent day and boarding schools. Most of the day schools are in New York City. The boarding schools are across the country. And then to and through the college pipeline as well. So I'm working on a specific initiative with a colleague focusing specifically on college success, retention for students from their first semester through completion, and helping them access social and cultural capital throughout those years, particularly with respect to career development. Our students are going to Ivy League institutions, top liberal arts colleges, and so making sure that they're taking full advantage of those communities and those networks, and making sure that when they graduate, they're landing jobs that are relevant to what they'd like to do, that they're pursuing their passions, while also making sure that they're going to be able to pay their loans off and all that jazz. So that's a little bit about the work that I'm doing. I came to Teachers College from the West Coast, from Southern California, needing kind of a change of pace. I guess it really got faster when you move from the West Coast to the East Coast. And for me, a big part of my experience was understanding the differences between Los Angeles, having grown up in LA, going through LAUSD public schools, and then being in New York City and seeing how the system works entirely differently. I worked in undergraduate college admissions at my alma mater at Occidental College in LA, and so I came to TC with that background, thinking I might want to work in the college access space. And so one of the most important courses that I took was the first class. I think it was literally the first class I walked into, which was Professor Doherty's transition. What is the full title? High school to college transition, which also is the name of my specialization. Nifty how you forget those things. And so that course really was a good transitional course for me as well, taking what I had kind of experienced, but also forced me to think about it, not from my anecdotal personal experiences, but from a theoretical framework, from a more macro picture too of the public education system for higher ed as well. And so that was a really big piece for me, kind of finding the ways to connect what I had been doing and kind of diving deeper into that. For me, networking was a really, really big part of being in New York. I went on informational interviews all fall. I interviewed with a data scientist at the College Board as one example, and people are willing and excited to speak with you as a student, which I found to be really helpful in my exploration of what New York City had to offer and just education policy in general. As far as coursework and things while I was here, I really enjoyed Doug Reddy's courses. I wish I was doing more policy analysis work in what I'm doing, but I do find that having that background, that ability to think in that way and to see those Venn diagrams that he likes to draw, is a really helpful way for me to approach the work that I'm doing as a practitioner at a nonprofit with a lot of people who don't know that language, that I'm able to kind of bring a more rooted, grounded framework to the work that I'm doing, rather than just the anecdotal stories about a student X or student Y, or 3 years ago we did this, but really say, well, let's look at our data, let's look at our research, let's look at our surveys and what we're seeing, and how can we understand that better in order to better serve our students. And so that course was really instrumental for me. Obviously, the courses I took with Professor Doherty were very important. I loved Penny's course. Again, she's from California as well. And Professor Kagan's course going down to DC over winter break was really great at the time. And yeah, I think I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Tova Gottesman, who is currently Special Advisor at the New York City Administration for Children's Services. And my daughter, as a community organizer, requires me to mention that she was a community organizer in her past life and a two-time AmeriCorps member. She's a graduate of the Sociology and Education program and a graduate of Ohio State University, which
right.
I hope indicates Midwestern origins.
No, Rochester.
You know how important it's been for me to have more Midwesterners, but please take it away.
Hi. Very jealous all of you have red wine and white wine at your table. I don't remember that back in 2012, 2011. I don't know if they had that at these functions. My name's Tova. I'm currently the special advisor in the Division of Financial Services at ACS. ACS, if you don't know, is the city's child welfare system. It's a $3 billion budget, 7,000 employees. We do juvenile justice in the city. We have foster care, child protection, family court legal services, preventive services for families, and probably the most relevant here is child care and Head Start. We have, I think, the nation's largest Head Start grant at $129 million, serving over 12,000 kids. We have a $500 million child care block grant from the state that serves about probably 60,000 kids. In total, we have 100,000 kids, ages infants through 13 years of age, in care at any time. We also have a contracted system called Early Learn, which kicked off in 2012. Very controversial. And that is, we contract directly with 150 CBOs, and they have about 400 sites, and they're serving maybe 35,000 kids. And so most of my work, I had to write my bio. I had to send it around to 3 of my colleagues because I'm like, I don't really know what I do every day. It varies. I respond to all the press inquiries when they ask, the press says, how many staff do you have in XYZ unit? Anytime, unfortunately, a child passes away. There's a lot of questions about CPS, so I respond to those press inquiries. Anytime any elected official has questions about, funding for child welfare or juvenile justice or on the child care side, I work on those talking points. I also coordinate the day-to-day for my deputy commissioner, who's the CFO of ACS. So it can be anything from move this meeting around and don't talk to that person, to talk to this person, kind of a gatekeeper, to like long-term strategic planning, RFP planning, looking at when our contracts expire. I hope ACS is participating in the $80 million initiative there because it does take a very long time to register. We have city council hearings throughout the year. They can be oversight hearings. They're 2 budget hearings. So I prepare for all of that. I would say that I'm never bored at work. I love working for the city. I fell into the job because I reached out to Columbia Impact because they had advertised something on some message board, and they do a lot of volunteer services, and sometimes they have paid volunteer services. So I reached out to Columbia Impact, and they hooked me up with a part-time AmeriCorps gig with an organization called Jumpstart, and they do language literacy, supplemental education for daycares and Head Starts primarily. And I thought, I want to see what a Head Start program is like here in New York City, versus because I taught at a private preschool in Ohio, which was very different. So I did that I did 2 AmeriCorps stints with them at the part-time, which was great because they also pay for, I guess, maybe the equivalent of 1 class at TC, but it's good, 1 last class to have to pay back for. But once I finished that, it was great. I really recommend it if Jumpstart's still around and that's an opportunity. I cold emailed the ED of that organization at the time, and I said, I saw that you moved to ACS. I'm really interested in working for the city. I've known that I've always wanted to work for the city. The moment, my U-Haul crossed, the George Washington Bridge. So I cold emailed her, got an interview. I'm sitting in St. John the Divine in the front row, and I see my cell phone's ringing, and I listen to the voicemail, and it's like, I want to offer you a job. And I was like, great, I don't have to do anything. Like, I have a job. And I had originally started as the chief of staff in the Division of Early Care and Education, and that's when we were kicking off this big new system called Early Learn, which if you look at the articles back in 2011, 2012, there was a lot of hate against because it totally transformed the way that those CBOs were getting paid And it's just a lot of old organizations closed, a lot of mom and pop organizations. So I will say coursework-wise, I TA'd for Kagan for FPI. I can't take it. I did her early childhood version as well. Take that one as well. The exposure you get just going down to DC is tremendous. I, like probably a lot of you, wrote this essay to get into this institution saying, I'm going to change the world. I want education to be a right, blah, blah, blah. And then I get down to DC and I'm like, ooh, And then I get to ACS and I'm like, oh no. But Kagan was phenomenal because the theoretical work really helped, because as we think about what the Child Care Development Block Grant is it's not focused. It was never meant to be focused on high quality early education services. It was for parents to work. And that's how New York City uses it. And so every day you see that, and then you see the difference with Head Start. And it's really it's very fascinating to be on kind of the bureaucratic side when you're 10,000 feet up in the air, which was a difficult transition for me. But you really get to see how these nonprofits work and what the city could be doing more to help them, and where private interest can come help them. A lot of them are struggling financially. Fiscal sustainability is it's a big issue in the nonprofit, especially the mom and pop daycare community. I will say that to work in the city now, if you're interested, I would take a test. You have to take a civil service exam. There's one open right now. I'm going to plug it because I also deal with personnel issues. It's called the Administrative Civil Service Exam. It probably costs $100. Take it. You won't get the results for another 6 months, but it's your way into city government now. They've really cracked down on provisional hires. But take that. Go to the DCAS website, DCAS, and I will say that go to your financial aid office here. I was in there all the time freaking out about my student loans because it is a lot of money. But they have the public service loan forgiveness program. Enroll in it, do it. I can't tell you, I'm going to stay in city government, I think, for the full 10 years so I can get the pension. But also at the end of it, all your student loans are forgiven, which is pretty amazing. And what other tips? I took Reddy's class, love them. I'm not a good quantitative person at all, even though I'm in financial services now, but I loved it. It's such a different way. It changed the way I look at problems. And Carolyn Reel's class, because she's also just so freaking fabulous and so much fun. And she taught me to also look at articles and publications through a different lens and think about the angle they're coming from. So I really enjoyed her class as well. And I think that's it.
Thank you very much. So our last speaker is Itek Bakker, who's lead researcher at the Technology for Education Consortium, and most recently was a member of the research team at the Center for Benefit Cost Studies of Education here at Teachers College. She's a graduate of the Economics in Education program. Let's take it away.
Thank you. Is there anyone that's in the econ program? I'm curious. One person? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I asked because while I was in my master's program, I would take classes from the org psych or other departments, and they were shocked that there was an econ program. And still, when I explain it to people in the world, they hear it as, oh, so you're learning how to teach economics instead of. Anyway, so what I do, I work for a nonprofit startup, Technology for Education Consortium, TEC. We're Gates funded, which I think we're the second one here on the table. You should take note of that because Gates funds a lot of the ed tech, especially startups now. And my title is lead researcher, but it's two of us in the organization currently with about 4 board members. One of them, a recent one, is Susan Ferdman from TC. She just joined us. And the other teammate I have is my CEO, and he was the former CIO of the New York City Department of Education. And that's the largest district in the country. So I'm telling you all this because what formed TEC, with his background with mine, was the deep concern around how archaic purchasing is for education technology in the K-12 space in the States. So this is actually very much related to what Minu was talking about. What you guys do, we're doing it specifically focusing on technology. So when you think of how fast your phone gets old even, and when you think of the technology from hardware to software that the students are using, the procurement process is too slow to catch up with it. Our average is about 2 years from the beginning of a school sending a request for, let's say, iPads into them actually starting to be able to use it in their classrooms. And I'm mostly referring to public schools. We came into it wanting to modernize it so that technology is aiding student learning instead of this sort of common idea of replacing teachers. My background is, as mentioned, is in benefit cost benefit, cost efficiency analyses. And while I was at TC, I ended up focusing on EdTech pretty early on, and I took advantage of, I think it was the class, I forget, I think it was International Finance of Education, something like that. And we got to do a project on whatever topic we wanted to focus on. So I picked EdTech because I just didn't know enough about it. And from then on, my interest grew in it, and I realized that there wasn't much of research on EdTech. Not just, so the research that's mostly done in research institutions, including TC, is what is the one standard deviation that we get from adding this math software into grade 2 algebra class, or well, second graders don't do algebra, but you get it. So the research that was laggard was mostly on what technology was out there. And this sort of relates to the advice that I would give you during your studies here is find connections between what you're doing and what's actually happening in the real world. I don't know about the other programs, but economics in general is seen as an ancient field, even though we use it every day in our lives, and try to make connections between whether it's a policy issue or it's statistics between that and what's going on in the real world. And these are actually things that you can see in your classes too. Our professor, Aaron Pellis, just had an amazing article on the Washington Post. And these things, I don't know if it's different now in TC, but we had to really spend hours on finding things about our professors or what they did in the room. They wouldn't tell us in the classroom. So he had a great article about DeVos and her potential impact on education. So I would recommend constantly making those sort of efforts to find that. More about TEC what we're doing is creating sort of transparency, efficiency, and collaboration in the technology space. I'm specifying that because a lot of what I'm doing is sort of creating what we call a taxonomy, this sort of new dictionary that helps technology people speak education and education people speak technology. And I think you'll find that a lot in whatever field you may enter. So if it's policy, academia speaking policy is so different than your nonprofit speaking policy. So I would just sort of this idea of finding the layman's language that everyone can relate to. That's what we're focusing on, and that's what we encourage every program to do, every sort of perspective to do in education. What I think the benefit that TC benefit, so I have to go to Joe here. The way I got my job, I was trying to remember it actually. So Joe and I are a few years apart in our MA studies, and we're not even in the same program, but we weren't in the same program. But so I worked with Hank Levin and Fiona Hollins, who run the Center for Benefit Cost Studies. And I explained to them my interest in ed tech, and I was doing studies with them, and also at the same time looking at job postings, and saw Harlem RBI having posted this. I think it was an unpaid sort of researcher position, but I just wasn't being picky at all. I called Joe, had a great interview. Well, I guess it was good. Who knows? But it was okay. That was sort of my attempt to connect, again, with the real world, because in econ, we weren't really discussing what's going on in the charter school system and research practices that are in the schools themselves, instead of sort of, again, looking at it from the outside as a university studying charter schools. So with Joe, I connected. I actually didn't end up doing the job, but because I was also a researcher at the Cost Benefit Center, or Benefit Cost Center, I ended up doing this sort of consulting freelance work for Harlem RBI, where I did a benefit cost study of their after-school program. So just a way of me to practice working alone, and then that was basically my portfolio going into the job market. I connected with other TC alum, and then after 2 years, I got an email from one of them saying, "Oh, I just thought of you because there's this new nonprofit that's trying to happen, and this is exactly the position that they're hiring for, what you've done, which is finance and studying the exact spending of ed tech," and that's what the organization is. So I was sort of lucky, but also I didn't give up on the focus that I had kept from the beginning. I'm happy to answer any other questions about what I do exactly, but in a nonprofit startup, it's a little hard, I think, similar to what someone else was saying, the same thing, where I'm doing a bunch of different things, from research to sort of connecting with vendors, schools, having them connect to one another. And when I say vendors, it's, for example, the latest study, or one of the more popular studies that I worked on, was Apple selling iPads on different prices to school districts. And it's a $13 billion industry, by the way, just ed tech purchases alone. So when you reveal price discrepancy of that sort, which is taxpayer money going into the same hardware that School A, New York, is paying $200 for, I'm giving you examples, and School B in California paying $500 for. So that was one study I did, and then something else that I am working on is how does K-12 communicate with higher ed? So constantly sort of finding these common languages, because we tend to separate the two, and I don't think they should be, especially when it comes to mediums like technology and other things. So this is sort of a brainstorming session of what I do.
Okay, thank you very much. Why don't we do this? Can we thank our speakers? And maybe what we'll do, let's bring down the microphones this way so that when questions are addressed to them, the microphone will be within easy reach. Could I mention that what struck me is certain themes kept reoccurring, and it really struck me in the discussions. One thing I was very much struck by the range of occupations that our speakers represent is that, coming out of relatively similar programs, going in quite interesting directions, and it's interesting to think about then what the degrees open up. And I was struck along the way by some of the lessons that we're talking about. Openness to experience was something that was being mentioned repeatedly, that an experience you might have can branch into new directions in ways that you might not anticipate. Our last speaker was giving a good example. You start here and it takes you in this direction. That often it's, don't be bothered if it looks like you're starting on the ground floor. You're doing Excel, but you never know. As Zach was saying, 3 weeks later, all of a sudden you're doing something rather different. So being tolerant of the fact that you may have to begin with what might first seem like, well, this is not what I was trained for, but it will be a benefit. Getting deep knowledge of and experience, I think the point was made by a number of speakers that it's really good to really get a deep knowledge of the subject so you can speak with a degree of confidence about it, and that this often reflects your passion. Part of that is getting deep knowledge and methods training. And remember, methods come, and there's not just quantitative methods. Qualitative methods can be extremely important as well, or even better, the juncture of the two. Networking is crucial. Several of our speakers mentioned that. And networking with a variety of people, fellow students, faculty, people that you're engaging in informational interviews with. So thinking about how you're building up a network of people who you know and they know. And that your culminating paper can also be a very useful entree to a number of positions because it becomes something you really know, something you can present. So I'm hoping I've captured some of what our speakers mentioned, but no doubt they'll bring out many other things. So why don't you then, if you have a question, just put up your hand. I'll recognize you. Might be better if you could stand up. Give us your name. And if you have a question that's for the speakers in general, state it, or if you want to particularly have a certain speaker address it, why don't you do that, okay? So, any questions people would like to raise? Back there, could you give us your name?
Hi, my name is Deja. I'm a second year in the sociology and education program. One thing, Manu, great job.
What's up?
What I'm struggling with right now with looking at potential jobs, I graduated in May, and how do you get around the experience, but you need experience for a job? I think that's my biggest struggle, especially I didn't take a break between undergrad and grad, so I'm coming with not the same levels of professional experiences that some of the members of my cohort or just people in general have. So how do you sell yourself and you know you're qualified and you'll probably be great at this job, but you may not necessarily have that professional full-time experience?
Can I answer?
Yeah, you can do it. Yeah.
I would kick myself if I didn't mention the Institute for Urban Minority Education, UMI. I don't know if Veronica Holly is still here, but she is. She is great. What I did while I was here was I went on every single message board because I did community organizing, which was like, kind of vague and doesn't make a whole lot of sense like necessarily in a resume, but to build it, I reached out to the Institute for Urban Minority Education. They sometimes just have, $500 sitting or, that you can do it, which opened me up to a lot more experiences in the city. Anytime a PhD student needed somebody to go run tests on, not tests, but like language tests on kids, I said, I'll do it, just so I could build up, especially from the city government perspective, they want to see like a continuous work. So even if you can piece together little jobs here and there for folks working on their dissertation, UMI, what else? I literally every week went on a different message board at TC to try to link together so I had a continuous kind of employment thing, even if it was just putting into Excel, Jake said yes, which I would also plug. If there's free Excel classes at Columbia, take them. Take Excel classes, And then I would also say, getting to know your professors. I was lucky to have Lynn Kagan as a reference for my jobs, and that made a huge difference. That opened doors that I didn't even know could open at foundation. So I think building close relationships with the TAs and with the professors is absolutely key, and I think that will, as somebody who hires people, you want to know that this person is smart, eager to work, quick learner, and I think that's what a reference can do for you, so don't underestimate the reference. But look at all the opportunities that TC has, and I would take advantage of all of them. Don't stop, just hustle the whole time.
Did someone else want to speak to the session?
I have one really quick thing, and I would just say lean in, that oftentimes we, particularly women, will read a job description that says 2 years of experience required or 5 years of experience required, and you look and reflect on yourself and say, oh, I don't have that. I don't check off every single bullet, and therefore don't apply. That oftentimes, given my experience doing some hiring, maybe Tova, maybe this is also your experience as well, that you you're not always hiring someone who meets every single criteria, that you make concessions along the way because you're willing to accept someone with less work experience who has really fantastic references, who has other great experiences, great talents, great things that they bring to the table beyond just 2 years or 5 years in the field. So that's one little tidbit I would add.
I just want to say in terms of involvement, join as many professional associations, student associations, clubs, meetup groups, hangouts of people who are doing stuff, because you can put that in a resume and you will come across as a more dynamic person who's doing things. I don't know where you are in the life cycle of your program. Again, there's the deep knowledge, the folks who it's like, oh, wow, you worked and you really know this thing, that's awesome, and you're basically on a career path towards that specific thing. If you're more a generalist and you're not sure what you want, again, the more you get out and do, the more attractive that might look to prospective employers. And another thing that I would say in terms of that, blanket the shit out of everything. Like anything, whether you think you're too junior or too senior, apply, because at the end of the day, if you need a job, I applied to like over 50 things. I got several offers, like a policy organization to be a regional weird thing for something I didn't even know what it was. I ended up taking this just because it's local, honestly. So it was like, I applied to everything under the sun, and I crafted every cover letter and resume for each thing as though I was born to do that, which is a lot of work, but it pays off.
And companies will, after an interview, if it goes really well and you're overqualified or you're underqualified, they often will adjust titles or responsibilities to fit the candidate. And so sometimes you don't know what everything behind the scenes of what an organization, company, or city agency is hiring for, but you're applying to one, but you may actually be a good fit for something else. That interview in and of itself is a networking opportunity for them to see what you have to bring to the table, and they might create something for you as well. Anyway.
I was going to say two things. One, utilize your classmates. I actually, when I went and I worked for the DOE, probably within pre-K alone, there were 10 TC students, and within DOE, there were we're everywhere. You can't get rid of us. And so you literally I worked for a year and a half out of the 2 years of my program, so I didn't get to know as many students as I wanted, and now I'm actually running into people that I recognize at work because they went to school with me and we know each other's faces, but we never actually met. And so, that's huge. So it's not just the professors and it's not just the TAs, but it's you guys. I'm now good friends with, vice principals, and there's so many different trajectories that the students around you are already on or have already been on. So utilize that, right? Someone in your class may already be doing or have done something that you want to do. Secondly, the first job that you might want to apply to, think about the skills that you want to take on and not necessarily the career you want to be in. So let's say that you want to eventually go and be a policy advisor. Well, what skills does it take to be a policy advisor? And your first job could be as an assistant, and it might seem like it has nothing to do with it, and you might be taking on all the skills, a lot of skills that you're going to need eventually to get into the role that you need or want to get into. So those are my two pieces of advice. Utilize your student network and think about the skills that you're trying to take on, which I think is similar to Joe's point, is try to find out what it is you want to do, figure out what that specialization kind of is, and then think about jobs that may not be what you want right now, but will eventually lead you to where you want to go. Because, when I started out as a case manager and I was working with schools, do you think I had any idea what it meant to become a DOHMH permitted pre-K site and what it required for a early childhood teacher to get certified? I had no idea, but I learned it, and that job has led me down this amazing career path. And so you have to be open-minded as well. But those are just a couple pieces.
Thank you very much. Why don't you keep it and we'll see. Any other questions people have back here? Tell us your name.
Hi, I'm Christina. I really don't want to get up. I have heels on. I guess it's a two-part question. My first question is, how are you positioning yourself to return back to your respective communities to actually serve those communities? Because all communities need help, right? And dismantling, white supremacy and bourgeois culture. Secondly, if you are staying in New York City, what practices are you employing, particularly reflexive practices, to reflect on your how you might be either enacting or disrupting particular power relations within education? Yeah, I can say that like in a very layman's terms too, but that's just my respectful way of saying it.
I mean, I can quickly, when I was at pre-K, and I think there will be other, because, you know, we have a panelist here who works for ACS, I saw a lot of the, I'm going to be really honest, our pre-Ks were really culturally fragmented. They basically were as segregated as the communities that they were in. So you had completely Russian schools, you had completely Jewish schools, completely Muslim schools, et cetera, et cetera. And you saw a lot of discrepancies also in terms of the facilities and the overall environment that these students were in that were very much reflecting their direct environments that they were living in. And I'm going to be really honest, it was hugely problematic for me because I was like, you know, what am I doing? How am I supporting, you know, am I just another cog in this cycle of, you know, poverty and just general injustices that I'm seeing? And so something that I actually was able to do was I openly talked about it. I'm going to be honest, when I was at DOE, people didn't really, at least in my division, it was like a taboo topic. You didn't really want to talk about it because there wasn't necessarily one right answer or a way to destructure to take down the entire structures that exist. But I learned a new motto in city work, and I actually live by it, and I actually love it, and it's that any progress is progress. You might not be, here's the thing, you're not gonna revolutionize the system overnight, but any small change that you can make is gonna impact things and be the domino effect later on. So something that we didn't have a student abuse policy. So if a staff member was accused of abuse, there was no support mechanisms for these students. The majority of these abuse cases, according to our research, occurred at our sites in the Bronx and other low-income areas. And so something that I was able to do is by recognizing that, by looking at the research, was actually implement support mechanisms that were directly going to go out. We created an entire incident reporting and regulation process for our social workers to go out and support sites where there were abuse allegations that existed. And if I had never brought up that conversation of what's happening, look at this link between where a lot of these accusations are occurring and the environments, the context, the social context of these schools, that policy would have never come about. So it was literally talking about it and being open even if other people are not talking about it. And I can thank TC for that experience because it kind of gave me for the lack of a better term, cojones to be able to say it without fear of, repercussions that may have come from it. So.
I'll go. So I occupy a slightly strange position in that my program is designed to recognize schools that have really strong practices, which also sometimes is wrapped up in having a high socioeconomic status student population. And it's something we're critically aware of and try to consciously address in those visits. But we also have a lot of schools that are not in that situation, and we have a lot of schools that are doing work to deliberately and very intentionally empower students. We have community schools. If you aren't familiar with the community schools model, there's a lot going on there. We have one of the schools that I work with directly, for instance, is their focus is affirming LGBTQ student identities, but also using those structures to affirm identities of all kinds for their students. And so we do a lot of work to try to identify and sort of give these practices a megaphone to share with the rest of the city, to say that we're doing these things and they matter, and we're doing them well, and we want to help you do them well also. And part of that is our office is an initiative of Chancellor Carmen Freina. That's a whole other issue, but the deputy chancellor for our division, the Division of Teaching and Learning, is Phil Weinberg, and he's really pushed in his tenure there to make equity and addressing social issues a focus of our division, and particularly using our office for that purpose. And so this is something that we've sort of, the opposite of Manu's experience is this is something that we've sort of been given time and space and resources to try to investigate, to see how can we use the position that we have and the structures that we have for having schools learn from each other and share with each other and identify strong practices to promote some social change that is badly, badly needed in this city.
Very quickly, what I do, I hire folks that represent the communities that we serve, and I develop them, which I think oftentimes is neglected in the professional workforce, is the actual hiring and development of disadvantage, or not even disadvantage, of just minorities. So Prospero, who you spoke with, you know, he had no experience. He got his dream job working with me. We developed him. That's awesome. Another thing I do is a lot of pro bono work. So I use my experience and my talents to work with social justice oriented nonprofits to give capacity that they couldn't otherwise have. I've had friends from TC who were, you know, social justice warriors. I've helped them get jobs. So those are sorts of the places where I think I do that the most.
I guess I'll represent all of ACS. So I think I guess I'll say two things. I guess one of the projects that my boss and I have been trying to work on for the past, since I've been with her 2.5 years, is there's a pretty large overlap between families who have an open child welfare case and they're not enrolled in high quality early childhood settings. You would think at ACS, here's one, we know who the families are who have an open case, and we have vacancies in our high quality early learn centers. Why aren't they enrolling? And it's trying to figure out where is that breakdown exactly in, do the parents not know that there are vacancies in their community? Is it because there's a stigma with ACS? That's probably a big part of it. Is there also funding issues? You know, there's different eligibility rules. When eligibility is being determined for a family to enroll in childcare, are they using CCBG rules or are they using preventive funding rules, which are much more flexible? And so we've gotten to the point now where we've figured out that we can't figure this out internally, and we've hired a consultant to come in and build us a true child welfare, referrals to child care for child welfare involved families. And we're also going to be hopefully expanding that to homeless families, because of the homeless families in the shelter system, 30% have an open child welfare case with ACS, and they're also not enrolled in our high quality early learn centers. So it's trying to bridge those gaps and work on just like complete old computer system failures, and just educating staff. There's a lot of turnover at ACS, so it's just making sure staff know about all the different policies and eligibility changes. I forget about the second thing I was going to say, but I would say that's probably my project that I care about the most, because it is the most complicated, but it makes the most sense. I will say that every day I'm so surprised by how much politics comes into every single decision we make. You cannot just make a decision alone. You have to go to your boss, who has to go to their boss, who has to go to their boss, who has to go to OMB, and then go to City Hall, and then they change it. So I think I'm always surprised by how much politics, and good politics, bad politics, whatever, it always seems to insert itself, no matter the best of intentions.
There was a question back there.
Jess Vance Gray at Policy, and this is more for you, Tova. I think you're one of the only ones with a EDM or a PhD up there, and I'm just curious, how important is that just for the people that you work with, or even for you? Oh, do you as well? It wasn't in the bio, sorry. So how important is that? Sometimes I think people buy the big SLR camera when they can really just use their iPhone, so I'm just curious.
So I'll say I was wrapping up, I think, 32 credits for an MA? I was getting close to it, and I thought, oh, God, I don't know enough. I'm not ready to go out into the real world. And I wanted to take more courses on the policy side. And so I thought, you know, what the hell? Let me just blow open my student loans. And I just decided to stick it out through the 60 course credits, and I'm so glad I did. I just was able to take way more courses. I got to know my my cohort so much more. I just think it made me a more well-rounded candidate. I don't think out there in the real world, at least in they have no idea what an EDM is. First of all, they're like, "What degree is that?" I said, "Master's of Education." They say, "Are you a teacher?" I say, "No." But I will say that I found it to be incredibly beneficial to me.
I'll be the counterpoint. I was having a great time. I'm like, loans, I have an EDM. And I took way more than the EDM required, which was really, so I was just like, oh, whatever, loans will take care of it. I'm going to let it ride. And I'm having so much fun, and I'm getting on research projects, and I'm building this really incredible, resume. If I were to do it over again, the incredible crushing weight of my debt, and I'm in the federal loan forgiveness program as well, is really horrific. So so what I would do is connect with more upperclassmen folks who have been in the program a year or two more than me, PhDs, and find out what do I really need to take. The cost benefit analysis needs to be severe, and you need to be a real opportunist in terms of maximizing every second that you're here. So that to me is what I'm delighted that I have it. It's a wonderful degree, and I had a great time. It was awesome. But there comes a time when it's like, wow, I'm going to be paying this for 10 years. Cross your fingers that doesn't get axed, because then I'm not going to cost, but man. So what I'd recommend is the short master's, and if you're serious about more education, consider a PhD that is funded or supported. That's where I stand.
Okay, other questions?
Unless you're rich. I didn't mention that one at all.
That always helps. Okay, so why don't we wrap it up now? Let's thank our speakers, and we'll have an opportunity to video with them. Yes. Okay, so our speakers clearly need to have some wine, and then an opportunity for you to be able to come up and talk to them. So thank you very much. We really appreciate you being here and you taking the time.